Elena had barely lifted her fork when her mother's voice shattered the laughter around the dining table. "Enough!" Diane Brooks slammed her glass onto the table so hard the silverware rattled. "I'm tired of pretending this is acceptable." Every conversation stopped. She pointed directly at Elena. "You're useless." No one spoke. "You spent years earning degrees, landed one of the best positions in hospital administration, and then threw it all away. Do you know what people ask me now?" Diane's voice grew louder with every word. "They ask why my daughter chose to work around dying people instead of building a real career." Elena lowered her eyes but said nothing. Her younger brother, Mason, leaned back with a smirk. Maybe she couldn't handle real success. A few nervous laughs spread around the table. Diane folded her arms. "You've embarrassed this entire family. Your cousins are executives, your friends are buying homes, and you—" She shook her head in disgust. "You chose failure." Elena opened her mouth. "Mom, No," Diane cut her off sharply. "For once, listen." At the head of the table, 82-year-old Grandma Evelyn remained perfectly still. She didn't defend Elena. She didn't interrupt. She simply watched every face around the room, as though quietly taking attendance. Then, almost unnoticed, her hand tightened around the handle of her cane. No one realized she had already made a decision. Sunday dinners at Grandma Evelyn's house had always been treated like family tradition. No matter how busy everyone claimed to be, they somehow found time to gather around her large oak dining table. Conversations usually revolved around promotions, investments, vacations, and whose children were collecting the most awards. Success was measured loudly in the Brooks family. Compassion rarely entered the conversation. Elena had learned long ago that defending herself only invited more criticism. So when Diane compared salaries, titles, and social status, Elena simply sat quietly, letting the accusations wash over her. "I still can't believe you left that administration job," one aunt muttered. "People would have killed for that position." "And for what?" another cousin added. "Hospice." Mason laughed again. "She spends every day with people who are dying. That's depressing enough by itself." More uncomfortable chuckles circled the table. Only Grandma Evelyn remained silent. Elena glanced toward her grandmother, almost pleading with her eyes. "Please, don't." Grandma understood the look immediately. She also understood exactly why Elena was asking. Diane noticed the exchange and scoffed. "Don't look at your grandmother. She can't defend a decision this foolish." For the first time all evening, Grandma Evelyn slowly pushed her chair back. The scraping wood against the floor silenced every remaining voice. With deliberate care, she stood, steadying herself with her cane before looking around the table, not at Elena, but at every person who had remained silent while the humiliation unfolded. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm. "So that's what all of you believe?" No one answered. Grandma nodded once. "Then it's time every one of you heard what really happened." The room fell completely still. Every eye turned toward her. No one had any idea what she meant. No one moved. For several long seconds, the only sound in the dining room was the soft ticking of the grandfather clock against the far wall. Diane let out a short laugh. "Oh, Mother, please." She waved a dismissive hand. "You're upset because Elena's feelings are hurt. We all love her, but love doesn't change facts." Grandma Evelyn didn't sit back down. She rested both hands on the top of her cane and looked directly at Diane. "I'm not standing because her feelings are hurt." Her calm voice carried more weight than Diane's shouting ever had. "I'm standing because all of you have spent years judging someone without bothering to learn the truth." An uncomfortable silence settled over the table. Mason shrugged. "What truth? Elena quit an incredible job. Everyone knows that." "Do they?" Grandma asked. No one answered. Diane folded her arms. "Mother, this isn't necessary." "It became necessary the moment you called your own daughter worthless." The words landed heavily. Several relatives shifted uneasily in their chairs. Elena finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Grandma, please." Grandma turned toward her with a gentle smile. "I know why you're asking me to stop." Elena lowered her eyes. "You don't have to defend me. I know. And I don't want anyone blamed." Grandma's expression softened even more. "That's exactly the problem." The room grew quieter. Even Mason stopped smirking. Grandma looked around the table, making eye contact with each relative one by one. "You've all spent the last 2 years forming opinions." She paused. "But tell me something." Her gaze settled on Elena's uncle. "Richard, how many times did you visit me during those 2 years?" Richard blinked. "Well, I was busy with work." Grandma nodded. She turned to Elena's aunt. "Linda." Linda hesitated. "I called." "I didn't ask if you called." Another silence. "I asked how many times you came." Linda looked down at her plate. Grandma continued around the table. One cousin admitted she had visited once. Another confessed it had been nearly a year. Someone else quietly said they thought another relative was helping. Each answer made the room noticeably heavier. Finally, Grandma faced Diane. "And you?" Diane frowned. "What does that have to do with Elena's career?" "I'll decide what it has to do with." Diane inhaled sharply, but didn't answer. Grandma waited. The silence stretched. "I visited when I could," Diane finally said. "When you could," Grandma repeated. No accusation. No raised voice. Just the words. Something about them made Diane look away. Mason tried to break the tension. "Grandma, none of this explains why Elena walked away from a career most people dream about." Several heads nodded. "Exactly," Diane said, quickly regaining confidence. "We're talking about her decisions, not everyone's schedules." Grandma slowly turned toward Elena. "My dear." Elena immediately shook her head. "Please don't." The entire family noticed it. Not embarrassment. Not fear. Something else. Almost protection. Diane frowned. "What is she trying to hide?" Grandma answered before Elena could. "She's trying to protect people who never protected her." The sentence echoed through the room. Elena closed her eyes for a brief moment. "Grandma." "I've stayed quiet because you asked me to." Grandma's voice remained steady. "But tonight your mother crossed a line." Diane's expression hardened. "This is ridiculous." "No." Grandma met her gaze without flinching. "What's ridiculous is that every person sitting at this table believed gossip was more important than asking one simple question." She slowly swept her eyes across the room again. "You all judged Elena's decision." Another pause. "But not one of you asked why she made it." No one spoke. The confidence that had filled the room only minutes earlier had begun to disappear. Even the relatives who had laughed now stared silently at the table. Grandma took one slow breath. Then she asked the question that froze every person in the dining room. "Who here actually knows why Elena resigned?" The silence answered for them. No one answered Grandma's question. The silence stretched so long that even the dishes cooling on the table seemed forgotten. Diane finally broke it. "Mother, enough." She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're making everyone uncomfortable." "I haven't even begun." Grandma Evelyn turned toward Elena. "In my study, there's a wooden box on the bottom shelf of the bookcase." Elena immediately understood which box she meant. Her shoulders tensed. "Grandma." "Please bring it." Elena hesitated. She looked from Grandma to her mother, then back again. For a brief moment, it seemed she might refuse. Instead, she quietly stood and walked down the hallway. The room remained silent until she returned carrying a small, dark wooden box with a brass lock. She placed it gently in front of Grandma. Several relatives exchanged puzzled glances. Mason leaned forward. "What's in there?" Grandma rested her hand on the lid. "The answer to every accusation made tonight." Diane reached toward the box. "This is absurd. Put it away." Grandma calmly moved it just out of Diane's reach. "No." She unlocked the brass latch. The lid creaked open. Inside were neatly stacked notebooks, folders, appointment calendars, and envelopes arranged with careful precision. Nothing looked random. Everything had been organized. Grandma lifted the first notebook. Its cover was worn from frequent use. She opened to the first page. Each entry was dated. Each page listed medications, blood pressure readings, specialist appointments, physical therapy schedules, grocery deliveries, prescription refills, emergency phone calls, and handwritten notes about difficult nights. The writing was neat, consistent, methodical. Grandma slowly turned another page. Then another. "There are hundreds of entries," one cousin whispered. "There are." Grandma gently closed the notebook. "Because someone came almost every single day." Confused faces surrounded the table. "Someone made sure I never missed an appointment." She placed another journal beside the first. "Someone stayed when I couldn't sleep." Another notebook joined the stack. "Someone sat beside me during tests." Another. "Someone learned every medication I was taking." The pile continued to grow. "And someone quietly rearranged an entire life without asking anyone here for praise." No one interrupted. No one laughed. The atmosphere had completely changed. Mason glanced toward Alina. "Who wrote all of this?" Grandma looked at him, but instead of answering, she asked another question. "Who do you think?" Mason frowned. I don't know." Grandma nodded. "Exactly." She reached into the box again and removed a leather appointment planner. Every hospital visit over 2 years had been highlighted. Every page contained initials confirming attendance. One aunt leaned closer. "Those initials." Another cousin picked up one of the notebooks. "I've seen this handwriting before." His eyes slowly shifted toward Alina. "So have I," another relative murmured. Around the table, people began comparing pages. The handwriting was unmistakable. Every notebook, every calendar, every reminder. The same careful script. Diane immediately shook her head. "This proves nothing." Several relatives looked at her. "It only proves someone helped Mother organize appointments." Grandma smiled faintly. "You still believe this is about paperwork?" Diane folded her arms tighter. "It could all have been written afterward." Before anyone could respond, Grandma opened one of the folders. Inside were signed nursing visit confirmations, pharmacy receipts, transportation records, and appointment checklists bearing matching dates. Each document supported the handwritten journals. Nothing stood alone. Everything matched. The room became noticeably quieter. Richard slowly looked at Diane. "This would have taken years." "It did," Grandma replied. Linda carefully turned another page. "These dates go back almost 2 years." "They do." Mason looked from the journals to Alina. "You never told us." Alina lowered her eyes. "I wasn't supposed to." Diane quickly stepped in. "Mother, you're making this seem much bigger than it is." Grandma didn't argue. Instead, she reached back into the wooden box one final time. She removed a thick cream-colored envelope sealed with an attorney's stamp. Without saying another word, she slid it across the table until it stopped directly in front of Diane. The entire family stared at it. Grandma met her daughter's eyes. "Open this." Diane stared at the sealed envelope, as though touching it might somehow make everything inside disappear. The attorney's stamp was unmistakable. For the first time that evening, her confidence faltered. "Mother," she said carefully, "what exactly is this?" Grandma Evelyn's expression never changed. "You'll find out when you open it." No one spoke. Every pair of eyes followed Diane as she slowly broke the seal. She unfolded the first document. Her face remained blank for a moment. Then the color drained from it. Richard leaned forward. "What is it?" Diane didn't answer. Grandma did. "Those documents were prepared by my attorney months ago." She folded her hands over her cane. "I realized that one day this conversation would become necessary." Linda frowned. "You planned this." "I documented the truth." Grandma's voice remained calm. "There's a difference." She looked around the table. "When I realized people had created their own story about Alina, I decided facts would matter more than opinions." Diane quickly found her voice again. "This doesn't explain why Alina left her career." "It explains exactly why." Grandma nodded toward the documents. "Keep reading." Diane reluctantly turned another page. Inside was a detailed timeline. Every date corresponded with the journals spread across the table. Hospital admissions, medical consultations, emergency room visits, specialist appointments, home care schedules. Everything carefully organized. Grandma pointed toward one section. "Look at the dates beside Alina's employment records." Richard leaned closer. His eyes widened. "These are promotion offers." "They are," Grandma said. "They're all marked," Linda whispered. "Declined." Grandma nodded. 3 promotions. Another page. Performance evaluations describing Alina as one of the strongest administrators in her department. Letters recommending her for regional leadership. Offer after offer. Opportunity after opportunity. Each one refused. Mason looked confused. Why would anyone do that? Grandma answered quietly. Because accepting those positions would have meant longer hours. She looked toward Alina. And longer hours would have meant leaving me alone. Silence. Grandma continued. Instead, Alina transferred into hospice nursing. Richard frowned. That paid less. Much less. And the schedule allowed her to be available whenever I needed her. Grandma slowly gestured toward another document. "Turn the page." Diane did. Several receipts were attached behind it. Hardware stores. Medical supply companies. Invoices from licensed contractors. Linda picked one up. Accessibility railings. Richard found another. Bathroom modifications. A cousin quietly added. Wheelchair ramp. Grandma nodded. Paid for by Alina. Mason looked directly at his sister. "You bought all of this." Alina hesitated. "I didn't think it mattered." "It mattered," Grandma replied. "It mattered every single day." Grandma reached into the wooden box once more. This time, she removed a stack of printed text messages. She placed them beside Diane. "You kept asking what this has to do with you." Diane stared at the pages. Her breathing slowed. "Don't." Grandma didn't stop. "Read them." Diane remained frozen. So Grandma picked up the first page herself. "Mom, your appointment is Friday. Can you come sit with Grandma for 2 hours?" She looked at Diane. "Your reply." Without waiting, Grandma read it. "I'm busy this week." She picked up another. "Could you stay with Grandma while I work the afternoon shift?" Another reply. "Ask someone else." Another page. "Grandma fell today. I need help getting her home." Grandma paused before reading the response. "I'm in the middle of lunch." No one around the table moved. Grandma placed the papers back down. There were dozens more. Richard slowly looked at Diane. You never told us, she asked. Linda shook her head. You said Grandma preferred being alone. Mason stared at his mother. You said Alina barely visited. Diane's lips parted, but nothing came out. The story she had repeated for 2 years was collapsing under the weight of written proof. Finally, she whispered, I didn't know everything. Grandma met her eyes. You knew enough. Another long silence settled over the room. No one looked at Alina the same way anymore. The woman they had mocked for abandoning success had quietly given up promotions, income, vacations, and savings to care for the one person everyone else assumed someone else would help. Alina stood motionless, wishing the floor would swallow her whole. I never wanted this, she said softly. I know, Grandma replied. That's why I had to do it. Diane suddenly straightened in her chair. There has to be more to this. I'm not finished. The interruption cut through the room like a blade. No one dared speak. No one spoke after Grandma's final words. The dining room, so full of accusations only minutes before, had become almost unbearably quiet. Grandma Evelyn slowly reached into the wooden box one last time and removed a slim folder. This, she said, laying it beside the journals, contains the only explanation that matters. She opened it carefully. 2 years ago, when my health began to fail, I called every one of my children. Her eyes moved from one face to another. I wasn't asking for money. She looked at Richard. I wasn't asking anyone to change their lives overnight. Then she turned to Diane. I simply asked for time. No one interrupted. I asked for visits. I asked for help getting to appointments. I asked for someone to stay with me after difficult treatments. She paused. Most of you had reasons. Richard lowered his head. Linda quietly wiped at her eyes. Some of you had work. She looked toward another cousin. Some had vacations already planned. Another relative stared at the table. And some believed someone else would do it. Her gaze settled gently on Alina. But one person never asked whose turn it was. Grandma smiled. She simply came. The words hung in the air. She arrived before work. Grandma turned another page. She brought groceries. Another page. She learned every medication. Another. She sat beside my bed during nights when I was afraid to sleep. Alina's eyes filled with tears. Grandma. Grandma reached across the table and placed a hand over hers. You never wanted anyone to know. Alina shook her head. You told me not to say anything. I did. Grandma nodded. And you honored my wishes. She looked around the room. But tonight, I can no longer allow silence to become another lie. Diane finally found her voice. You could have told us. Alina looked at her mother for the first time that evening. I tried. Everyone turned toward her. There were so many times I wanted to explain. Her voice trembled. But Grandma didn't want the family fighting over her. She swallowed hard. So I let everyone think whatever they wanted. Richard stared at Alina in disbelief. You let us believe you threw your career away. Alina nodded. It seemed easier. Easier, Mason asked quietly. You let us call you a failure. I knew why I made my decision. She looked toward Grandma. That was enough for me. No one had an answer. Linda covered her face. Oh, Alina. I'm so sorry. One by one, other relatives echoed the apology. Not because Grandma demanded it. Because they finally understood. Mason stood first. He walked around the table until he reached his sister. I laughed at you. His voice cracked. I didn't even ask one question. Alina looked at him. I know. I'm sorry. She simply nodded. Then Richard spoke. I judged you. Linda added. So did I. The younger cousins quietly apologized as well, ashamed that they had repeated stories they never questioned. Only Diane remained silent. She stared at the journals spread across the table. Every page was another reminder of the days she had chosen not to come. Grandma broke the silence. There is one final document. She picked up the legal papers Diane had opened. I changed my estate plan months ago. Diane looked up immediately. Grandma continued before she could speak. This decision has nothing to do with rewarding one person or punishing another. She looked around the room. It has everything to do with trust. She placed the documents in front of Alina. I have appointed Alina as the executor of my estate. A murmur spread through the family. Grandma raised a hand. Because she has already proven she will honor my wishes when no one is watching. She smiled softly. A person's character is revealed in private, not in public. Then she explained the rest. A portion of her estate would establish a charitable fund supporting hospice patients whose families could not afford additional care. Another portion would maintain the family home. Everything had been carefully planned with her attorney. Nothing had been decided in anger. Diane slowly lowered the papers. So, I'm not in charge. Grandma answered gently. No. The single word carried no bitterness. Only certainty. For the first time in years, Diane had no authority to lean on. No one looked to her for approval. Instead, every eye turned toward Alina. The woman who had entered the evening, as the family's embarrassment had become the person they respected most. Weeks later, the atmosphere around the Brooks family had changed completely. The Sunday dinners became quieter. People listened more than they judged. Several relatives began visiting Grandma regularly, not out of obligation, but because they finally understood how much time they had already lost. Diane apologized to Alina privately. It wasn't a perfect conversation. Years of pride couldn't disappear in a single afternoon. But for the first time, she admitted she had cared more about appearances than about understanding her own daughter. Alina accepted the apology without pretending the hurt had vanished. Some wounds healed slowly. Months later, after Grandma's wishes had been peacefully carried out, Alina returned to the hospice, where she continued caring for patients with the same quiet compassion that had always defined her. The charitable fund in Grandma Evelyn's name began helping families facing the same difficult journey they had shared. In Grandma's study, the journals remained on the bookshelf. Not as evidence anymore. As a reminder. Whenever family gathered, no one spoke about job titles first. They spoke about kindness. About showing up. About the things that never appeared on a resume, but mattered most when life became difficult. As the family left Grandma's home that final evening, they carried one lesson none of them would ever forget. The person they had called useless had been holding the entire family together all along.